So just how do you find investors for real estate syndication? This is Tilda Moschetti of Altitude Syndication Founders Club. We're going to go through a very high-level talk about that today. It's a common question. It is probably the starting point and one of the sources of fear and confusion for most syndicators getting started. Just how do they get started in finding those investors? So there's really two ways to find anybody and to do this. So there's an online way and there's an offline way. But before we even get to that, we start with the very basics of, first, who is your syndication company? What is it that you stand for, and what is your, what we call in our program, our founder investment theory? So what is that theory of investing, of selecting properties that you bring to the table? You see, if you are a massive speculator and you're going after these huge returns, you're going to immediately turn off every investor who's looking for just a nice, safe return, wanting to diversify their portfolio. But if you are somebody who is very, very conservative and you're only looking for those very strong, stable, not a lot of cash flow, but there probably will be good appreciation and they're not going anywhere. So those kinds of deals, you're going to immediately turn off all of those investors who are looking for those huge returns that take place in a year. So both of those are kind of opposed to each other, right? So what we tend to preach here at Altitude Syndication Founders Club is just how do you select your investment theory so that when you're showing up to investors, you are consistent from the beginning to end. And then you take that founder investment theory and you come to it with the philosophy of, I am going to be building a relationship with my investors. This is a long-term relationship because it's much easier to establish a relationship with an investor over and over again and to get them to do more and more deals with you rather than to try and find new investors every single time. So that's the philosophy, and then we bring to them the founder investment theory, and we take those core elements and we apply them to both an online search and an offline search. In the online world, we have different ways. We can advertise. We can, if we're doing it as, for example, of Regulation D 506C, or we can, or if it's a Regulation A, we can advertise. We can put things on our funnels. We can do things like that. It's okay if people know about your deal in the online world if it's not being syndicated, so long as you've got a very strong relationship already set up. So for example, if on LinkedIn you put, look, I've got a 506B offering that's taking place, and here's the property and here's what it's going to be doing. And as part of that conversation, you have investors like saying, hey, that sounds pretty good. Now, each one of those investors, because you're not allowed to technically advertise under 506B, each one of those deals, you need to then show that you've had a substantial existing business relationship prior to them seeing the advertising. So that way, if the SEC ever comes knocking, you can clearly demonstrate, look, this person is an accredited investor, and I've had all of these ongoing communications with them before. That's one of the criteria to make sure is in place if you're going to be doing the online world. Typically, we're not doing much in the online world if it's not part of a 506C or a Regulation CF or Regulation A. Now, on the flip side, we have offline marketing. And here, really, real estate professionals have kind of an advantage because they've spent a lot of time building that relationship, trying to get listings and trying to sell property. And so they've got already some pre-existing relationship set up. Now, you'd want to make sure that that pre-existing relationship is sufficient in order to comply with rule, if you're going to be doing like a 506B offering, you want to make sure that that relationship is sufficient enough to still allow those investors. But if you're doing a 506C, you've already got those relationships, advertise away, and that's terrific. But it's building that sphere of influence and expanding that sphere of influence larger. So, I mean, obviously you start with your friends and family, and then you grow it outwards to people you've done business for, and then you continue to grow outward and grow outward. So hope that helps. This is Tilda Moschetti, Altitude Syndication Founders Club. If you want more information about how to find investors, give us a call, contact us, because through our program, through the Altitude Syndication Founders Club, we do trainings on how to build those relationships quite frequently. It's part of what we do, and hope that helps. 3, 2,